My third uncle works in the province and is a department-level cadre. However, although my third uncle was a department-level cadre, my father never mentioned him to outsiders. One morning, when my mother passed by the door of the village secretary Joe Dashin's house, she was bitten by Joe Dashin's big dog. At that time, the mother had a rake in her hand, so she beat the big dog with the rake. Unexpectedly, Joe Dashin saw his mother beating the big dog with a rake. Joe Dashin came to my mother, first took the rake from my mother's hand, and then injured my mother. After my mother was injured by Joe Dashin, she struggled to get up and then told my father about the injury. After hearing what my mother said, my father first called the emergency number and then called the police. The police came before the ambulance. After the police came, they asked my mother some questions and then left. When the police were leaving, my mother said to the police, "Joe Dashin injured me, why don't you punish him?" The police said, "You said Joe Dashin injured you, do you have evidence? If you don't have evidence, how shall we punish him?" The ambulance came and took my mother to the hospital. I no longer go to school, I work in other places. One morning, I received a call from my father, who told me on the phone that my mother was injured by Joe Dashin. I said to my father, "Dad, I will take leave and come back immediately." After I arrived at the hospital, my father told me about the police's failure to punish Joe Dashin. I said to him, "Dad, you should go to Secretary Zhang and tell him that my third uncle works in the province and is a department-level cadre. Or you can call my third uncle and ask him for help." My father thought for a while and then said, "Let's do this. When your mother recovers and is discharged from the hospital, I will go find Secretary Zhang." Since I only took 3 days off, I went back to work quickly. 2 days before my mother was discharged from the hospital, I took another leave. While I was on leave, my mother was discharged from the hospital. After my father and I took my mother home, we received a call from my boss, who urged me to go back to work. So I said to my father, "Dad, I can't accompany you to find the town secretary. I have to go back to work." The morning after I left home, my father went to see the town secretary. The town secretary's surname was Yang, but my father did not see Secretary Yang when he arrived in the town. The director of the town's petition office received him. The director of the petitions office said to my father, "Secretary Yang is very busy, I have time to receive you." After listening to what the director of the petitions and calls office said, my father thought about it and then mentioned my third uncle to the director of the petitions and calls office. He told the director of the petition office, "My third uncle works in the province and is a department-level cadre." After hearing what my father said, the director of the complaints and calls office said, "Well, you go back today and I will report your situation to Secretary Yang." Then, the director of the complaints and complaints office asked my father to leave his mobile phone number. The next morning, my father received a call from Secretary Yang. Secretary Yang asked my father to go to his office on the phone. After my father arrived at Secretary Yang's office, Secretary Yang said to my father, "You said that your third brother works in the province and is a department-level cadre. Can you call your third brother now?" My father said, "Of course I can call my third brother now." After my father said that, he took out the mobile phone from his pocket and called my third uncle. After answering my third uncle's call, my father told my third uncle that my mother had been injured by Joe Dashin and that she was now in Secretary Yang's office. Suddenly, Secretary Yang said to my father, "I will not be allowed to talk to your third brother." By this time, Secretary Yang's attitude towards my father had changed, and he began to respect my father. After listening to what Secretary Yang said, my father handed the phone to Secretary Yang. After Secretary Yang spoke to my third uncle for 2 minutes, he returned the phone to my father. After my father hung up the phone, Secretary Yang said to my father, "I will solve your problem. I will call Joe Dashin now and ask him to come to my office." After speaking, Secretary Yang picked up the phone on the table, and then called Joe Dashin. After the call was connected, he said to Joe Dashin, "Joe Dashin, come to my office right away." About half an hour later, Joe Dashin came to Secretary Yang's office. Secretary Yang said to Joe Dashin, "Joe Dashin, why did you injure Wang Meihua?" "Wang Meihua is my mother's name." Joe Dashin said, "Secretary Yang, when did I hurt Wang Meihua? I didn't hit Wang Meihua at all." Secretary Yang said to Joe Dashin, "Joe Dashin, do you know that Li Yotsai's third brother works in the province? Let me tell you, Li Yotsai's third brother is now a department-level cadre." Joe Dashin said, "Secretary Yang, I have long known that Li Yotsai's third brother works out of town, but he has never said that his third brother works in the province and is a department-level cadre. I guess he is bragging." Secretary Yang said, "Joe Dashin, Li Yukai is not bragging. His third brother is indeed working in the province and is indeed a department-level cadre. I just talked to his third brother on the phone. After listening to Secretary Yang's words, Zhou Dashan suddenly said to my father with a smile on his face, Liu Kai, your third brother works in the province, why didn't you tell me? Let's do this, I will compensate you 30,000 yuan. My father said, Zhou Dashan, your compensation of 30,000 yuan is too little. I want you to pay me 60,000 yuan. Zhou Dashan thought for a while and then said, okay, I will compensate you 60,000 yuan. The next morning, my neighbor Aunt Wang came to my house. She said to my father, you didn't expect that your third brother was actually a high official. Why didn't you tell me before? My father said, he is a senior official, but I am not a senior official. Why should I talk about him? Now let's talk about Aunt Wang's situation. Aunt Wang is a talkative woman. She often speaks ill of my parents in the village. One morning, she found that her chickens were missing 3 chickens, and she said that my parents had stolen her 3 chickens. There is an old bachelor in the village. The old bachelor helps my family with farm work during the busy farming season. He said that the old bachelor had an improper relationship with my mother. To be honest, he bullied my parents because he saw that they were honest. Now he heard that my third uncle is a department-level cadre, so he came to my house to flatter my father. One night, I received a call from my father. My father told me on the phone that my third uncle was about to be transferred to the city where my father was located to serve as the municipal party committee secretary. One night half a month later, I received another call from my father. My father told me on the phone that my third uncle had been transferred to my father's city to serve as the municipal party committee secretary. One afternoon, I took my girlfriend home. My girlfriend's name is Li Xianger. Li Xianger and I took the bus to the station in the town and got off the bus quickly. After we got off the bus, I took Li Xianger and walked out of the town. Suddenly, 2 young men stopped us. A tall young man said to Li Xianger, this lady is so beautiful. How about my brother taking you to a tea house for tea? After he finished speaking, he started to touch Li Xianger. Li Xianger was very scared, so I quickly said to the tall young man, don't act like a hooligan. After listening to what I said, the tall young man said to the short young man, he actually said that I was acting like a hooligan. What do you think we should do? The short young man said, hit him and don't show him any color. He doesn't know how many eyes Lord Ma has. As soon as the short man finished speaking, 2 young men hit me. After they hit me, I started to fight back, but it was hard for me to fight with 2 fists, and I was soon injured by them. After they injured me, they wanted to drag Li Xianger away. I quickly took out my cell phone from my pocket and said to them, let her go quickly, otherwise, I will call the police. The tall young man said, you don't know who I am. Let me tell you, my dad is the mayor of the town. It's useless even if you call the police. I know all the policemen in the police station. After listening to what the tall young man said, I called the police. About 10 minutes later a police car drove up, and a policeman and an auxiliary police officer got out of the car. When the police and auxiliary police arrived, they greeted the tall young man warmly. Then the police started asking about the situation, so I told them what had just happened. Unexpectedly, the policeman was about to leave after asking about the situation. When I saw the policeman was about to leave, I quickly said to the policeman, Comrade policeman, my third uncle is the municipal party committee secretary. After listening to what I said, the policeman said to me, young man, you can't pretend to be a relative of the municipal party secretary. I said, Comrade police, my third uncle is really the municipal party committee secretary. But no matter what I said, the police just didn't believe that my third uncle was the municipal party committee secretary. Finally, the policeman said to me, young man, I'll leave first if I have something else to do. Let me tell you, if you are not injured, I will arrest you and take you to the police station because you are pretending to be a relative of the municipal party committee secretary. After the policeman finished speaking, he took the auxiliary policeman and left. After the police and auxiliary police left, Li Xianger was dragged away by 2 young men. After Li Xianger was dragged away by 2 young men, I quickly called my father. I told my father on the phone what had just happened. My father said to me, I'll be in town right away. After seeing me, my father said to me, I will take you to Secretary Yang right away. After we met Secretary Yang, my father told Secretary Yang that I was injured by 2 young men and that Li Xianger was dragged away by 2 young men. After hearing what my father said, Secretary Yang said, I'll call Mayor Zhao right away. Not long after, Mayor Zhao came to Secretary Yang's office. Secretary Yang said to Mayor Zhao, Mayor Zhao, Li Youcai's third brother is Secretary Li of the Municipal Party Committee. Your son just injured his son and dragged his son's girlfriend away. After hearing what Secretary Yang said, Mayor Zhao said, "This bastard, I'm going to call him now." After speaking, Mayor Zhao took out his mobile phone from his pocket and called his son. About half an hour later, two young men brought Li Xianger to Secretary Yang's office. "You bastard!" Mayor Zhao scolded the tall young man and then slapped the tall young man. Secretary Yang said to Mayor Zhao, "Mayor Zhao, Li Youcai's son is injured now. Send him to the hospital for treatment quickly." Mayor Zhao said, "Okay, I'll call the emergency number now." When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics got me into the ambulance. After I was taken to the hospital in the city by ambulance, my father called my third uncle. After my third uncle arrived at the hospital, my father cried and told my third uncle that I was injured by two young men and that two young men dragged Li Xianger away. After hearing what my father said, my third uncle said, "These two young men are really too arrogant. I will call Director Su now." The Director Su my third uncle mentioned is the director of the Public Security Bureau. After my third uncle made the call, about 20 minutes later, Director Su came to the hospital. He first visited me, and then said to my third uncle, "Secretary Li, I have given an order to arrest those two young men." After I returned home from the hospital, my father told me that the two young men had been punished by law, and that Zhou Dashan had been removed from his position as village secretary. I asked my father, "Has Mayor Zhao been dismissed?" My father told me, "Mayor Zhao has been transferred to the County Archives Bureau as the deputy director."